Welcome to another episode of Don't Call It Small. I'm your host, Natasha Foreman. If you don't know me and you have no clue what this podcast is all about, let me share a bit. I'm a lead management consultant at Foreman & Associates, LLC, where we provide consulting and professional development services. And Don't Call It Small is where we talk all things business, share tips and news that you can use, and highlight the people and ideas behind the products and services that we buy. To learn more about our team, please visit foremanllc.com. That's FOREMANLLC.com. Hey everyone! I'm glad to be with you all today. It's a blessing indeed. Oh my goodness. So today we're going to jump into some HR 101, some Human Resources 101, and we're going to look at recruiting. And specifically, we're going to look at recruiting underrepresented groups. So let me start off first with a quote from Aretha Denzi Flores that says, "The value of a diverse team is its capacity to challenge the norm or groupthink and thus boost organizational performance and improve decision making." You know, in episode 54, we talked about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and the bandwagon that different companies have jumped on, and how companies and individuals need to self-audit to ensure that you're not, doing it to be on a bandwagon or just to be in compliance or just doing it for PR reasons or doing it for the gram, but that is authentic and the culture of your workplace and the values of your company is founded on these principles and practices and beliefs. So when we look at diversity, I like to now use an analogy that one of my former college students shared. He equated it to a salad with all of the unique ingredients, flavors, and qualities, distinctive, different, not blended, and not all the same, but each complementary yet distinguishable. You know, the tomato, you can distinguish the tomato from the onion, from the crouton, from the sunflower seed, from the broccoli, so on and so forth. Because who wants a salad with no toppings? I mean, that's just lettuce. And I'm not a rabbit. My palate needs more. I don't want just lettuce. I don't want just carrots. I need some variety. So when we think of diversity, representation matters. And when we think of inclusion, it is that we not only are you there. So, okay, we have all these ingredients, but these ingredients are contributing and we're tapping into those ingredients. We are seeking those ingredients' energy to be expressed, right? So there's a quote from Andres Tapia that says, "Diversity is the mix. Inclusion is making the mix work." So when, I know we've talked about diversity before in different episodes, including, like I said, episode 54. And I know a lot of times when people are thinking about diversity, it's quick to go based off of gender, race, sexual orientation, ethnicity. But did you know that the group with the highest unemployment rate in the United States are people who are mentally, verbally, or physically differently abled? That's an absolute shame. So most people say disabled. I don't. I say differently abled. But that's the highest unemployment group. And it's been that way for the longest. So it's interesting because, as we're going through all these changes in society nowadays, we're still hearing companies that are crying out because, they have this shortage of workers. And, I have to sit back and say, well, heck, how wide of a net are you actually casting? It's like, it's like hitting the same bars and wondering why you're meeting the same people and kind of people. It's like step outward, go outside of your normal parameters, step outside of your comfort zone, try different, try new. I How many candidates from underrepresented groups are you actively recruiting? If you're looking and feeling a little dumbfounded, let's peel back the layers. Let's pop open your hood, pop the hood up, and take a look under it. So when we, first let's address what underrepresented groups are, URGs. So individuals that are part of an underrepresented group are persons who come from a particular group that you don't see widely in various industries and fields like science, technology, engineering, math, just to name a few. And you see them disproportionately less represented in leadership positions. I just had to do it. I don't know why it just came to me. But we do. We see a even smaller number in our mid-level and senior level management positions. We see an even smaller percentage sitting on boards of our corporations, various corporations. So, the numbers shrink the higher up and the more influence and the more that input would be expected, and the higher the salary, right? You start to see those numbers shrink. And those backgrounds, as I mentioned earlier, it could be our different ethnicities, it could be gender-based, it could be sexual orientation. And that's what we normally gravitate when we think about diversity, when we think about, having some type of equity and equality in the workplace. But that's not the limit. And I've already mentioned people who are differently abled. I also always ask people, have you also considered veterans and individuals who were previously incarcerated and those who are homeless? Because yes, they too are drastically, you see that disproportionate figure of representation. And let's be clear, not one of the groups that I've mentioned, I'm going to put this out here because I feel like this is always something that people default to. There's not one of the groups that I've just mentioned that want to be recruited and hired just because they're underrepresented or considered a minority. They have skills and talents and gifts that they want to contribute, and they want an organization to give them the chance to prove they can produce the results that they claim they can. So don't just recruit and hire me because I'm a woman who is African American. That's just absolutely disrespectful. I'm not a token. I'm not an object, right? Don't put me in a box. I'm not an object. You should want my story to be part of your company's story, knowing that my story is not just defined by or limited to my census demographics. And guess what? It's also not just where I went to school, what I majored in, my GPA, or my scores on standardized tests. I could work 20 years for a company and they still wouldn't fully know my story. And that's the beauty of it. That's the reason why you should want to have a variety of stories. That's why recruiting candidates for your company has to be more than checking boxes. But you have to look inward before you look outward. So I'm going to share this. I always share something. I'm always going to share one of my blunders, my mistakes, or my lessons learned. And I remember I think it was like 1997. I was about 21. I was going to place a job posting for a position I needed filled. I needed an assistant to endure the treacherous waters I was swimming in. I was in the music industry. And because the industry is toxic and chauvinistic and misogynistic, I thought it would be wise to put in my ad that I preferred a male assistant. Thank goodness I let my dad proof my ad before I posted it. He told me, number one, I was violating the law. Number two, I was being sexist. Number three, I was ignorant. Number four, to consider how I would feel as an applicant to read that ad. Now, my 21-year-old self thought I was doing the right thing. I was sparing a woman from the foolishness. I mean, wow. How silly, naive, ignorant, and foolish I was. Do you see? I had good intentions, but imagine those negative outcomes had my dad not intervened and opened my eyes to the truth. But also, how bias can warp our judgment. I was being sexist. I was saying that I, as a female, I could handle being in the industry. I could handle the misogyny, and I could handle the sexist statements and the chauvinism and all the nonsense. I could. Because I'm unique and tough and strong-willed and qualified. But let me spare the precious nature, of the feminine energy, the damsel that would forever be tarnished by this male-dominated poison. I mean, really? I mean, I am over dramatizing it, but I'm doing so to make a point. Gender had absolutely nothing to do with qualifying that position. It was about personality, grit, endurance, and character. Yep. Not even the resume mattered as much as the mindset of the candidate. I needed a person who could endure crazy hours, constant change, narcissistic industry executives and creatives, really high highs and some painfully low lows. I needed someone who could handle rejection and setback, failing and failure. Someone who could handle ignorant comments like, "You're just the assistant," or "You're just a hired help," or fill in the blank with the stupidest, demeaning, elitist comments you can think of to talk down to a lower ranking staff person. Because guess what? I've heard idiotic people refer to admins, receptionists, studio runners, and others in these and other ways, and it's just ridiculous. So gender nor resume could insulate a person from being on the receiving end of a verbal or physical attack. That was just the reality. What I wanted and needed was a lion that could command respect with grace. I never made that mistake in my thinking and approach after that afternoon in 1997. Thanks to my Father in heaven. Thanks, Dad, for the save and for the lesson and coaching. I share this example because how many people say, we can't hire a woman for this position because it's too intense, it's too dangerous, it's too, how they're going to be handled. I don't think they can handle the heavy equipment. I don't think they can handle the load. They're not as strong as a man. Whatever. Or, they may not feel comfortable being the only blank here. So the only black person, the only, Latin person, the only whatever. Fill in the blank. People say it. Or we can't hire a blank person because blank. Whatever excuse that trails in. Or, here's one. I would prefer a woman to be my assistant because traditionally women have been secretaries. I'm not making that one up. I've known several men utter these stupid words, and I'm always drawn back to my experience in 1997. Although I wanted a male assistant, it wasn't because I think that men make better assistants. I think people with certain skills and temperaments make great assistants. The best are lions with grace. I was a heck of an amazing assistant. Yes, I will pat myself on the back. I made an amazing assistant. Hence why I was able to build a business around creating business support services for companies for years. I was great at that. It's not for everyone. And it's not gender specific. It is all about your character, your personality, your temperament. And, something else that just came to my mind, when we look at personalities and characteristics and temperaments, I had male employees who served in other roles in the company, and there were plenty of instances when I would have assumed they had the grit and toughness to endure something that came their way, but they didn't. So once again, it ain't gender specific. It's upbringing, it's life experiences, it's exposure. It may just very well be that hard knock life. So no, don't recruit by checkbox, because those boxes don't answer how that person handles adversity, tight deadlines or change, for example. So when I revamped my job posting and with gender neutral language and with a focus on my true intent and needs, what I was bringing to that relationship, right? I hired an assistant who wasn't a male. They didn't have a strong or lengthy admin background. Their college background wasn't a factor because, if memory serves me correctly, she didn't even attend college, hadn't even attended college. I knew for the most part she could learn on the job many of the skills needed. And ironically, I had to train her to not think that I needed a coffee runner in the traditional functions most people assign to admins. Like, that's literally what she thought. Like, she's supposed to just go and run and get me coffee and all the stuff that you saw on whatever, I don't know, 9 to 5. I don't know. I was like, no, this is not that kind of gig. This is not what I need. And so in molding, it really empowered her in so many ways. Now, it's not to say that she didn't take some heat being in that industry. But I will say that she was a person who had faced adversity and had experienced bumps and bruises and had to fight and climb to build herself back up from being knocked down. And so with that, when she had been on the receiving end of some idiotic comments from different people in the industry, but once she brought it to my attention, I did for her what I would have done whether she was male or a person of color or disenfranchised or whatever. Check a box. Whatever. I did for her what I would do for any human. I went back to those individuals and got knee deep in that situation. So by the time this lioness over here was done, they had a lesson on dignity, respect, and honor, and they promptly made things right with my assistant through an apology and acknowledging how and why they were in the wrong. And this is something I've always done for my employees and coworkers, and I will fight for them and advocate for them, period. It's about the care you have and what you pour into your teams. Intentionally recruiting people from various backgrounds to gain fresh and unique experiences and storylines shouldn't feel like labor. It should feel empowering because you're broadening your reach and broadening your organization's capabilities and resources. I have a quote from Charles K. Poole that says, "You can't categorize diversity based on what someone looks like. It's what that person can do for the organization." And I've heard some interesting pushback to hiring, for instance, the previously incarcerated. It's interesting. It's like, what's the point in serving time just to keep being punished once you're no longer incarcerated? There's absolutely no point. Yet we know that this is what people experience with daily rejections from employers who still have the audacity to have application questions that filter candidates based on any misdemeanor or felony arrest. Now, let's be clear. I know you want to be mindful of who you hire to be around children, and you definitely don't want a serial rapist working around, potential victims or around rape survivors. But does the person who stole food from the grocery store end up with a lifetime ban from meaningful, uplifting work? And what if all you know is that they serve time, but you don't have the background behind it? So you don't even know the details. But what's crazy is, how is it a person could steal millions of dollars, get a slap on the wrist, possibly even a pardon, and bounce back with a cushy executive job with jaw-dropping perks and benefits? Well, it's simple. It's because life is about relationships, and that executive had those influential relationships before they got busted and maintained many or enough after. And they leverage those relationships for their gain and rebound. So when you're lacking those resources from Jump Street, there's rarely a bounce back or even a bounce. It's more like a thud or a splat. That's the difference. Because that's not even race-based. Like, it's not even, you can't even just, you could put that on economics, but it really comes down to those relationships. That's how someone can turn around and commit all these different frauds and do all these different Ponzi schemes and blah, 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 and bounce right back. And then we're reading a comeback kid story about them, 10, 20 years later. Like, really? So I always wonder. I sit back and I scratch my head because people say, they don't want to hire a convict. Ugh, and I swear I cringe when I hear them say that. I don't want to hear a convict. I don't want to hire a criminal. Yeah, I've heard these descriptors. So what are some of the excuses to not hire? I mentioned, of course, the really big, bold, obvious ones, right? So what I've heard in response is, well, what if they steal from the company? Well, Natasha, what if they're dangerous? That's something that should be a question for every job candidate. But we don't usually know until after an incident happens, like dating a cheater. It's not like someone's advertising that they're a cheater. It's not like I get to see a website and see that they're a cheater. There's no cheaters.com for me to then turn around and go and search before I go and have a date with, whoever. So, and when I first go on a date with them, do I say, hey, are you a cheater? Hey, are you an abuser? If they are, they're going to lie. So we don't know. The Wall Street crooks that were stealing millions didn't have prior rap sheets. Many came from good stock, as people used to say. Character is character. It ain't a checkbox. It is not a checkbox. And a mistake I made in my past, it shouldn't haunt and restrict me in my future. I shouldn't continue being punished for something I already served time for, was already punished for. And it's true, however, that people from underrepresented groups will always have an even lower chance of being hired if they are from a URG, an underrepresented group, and they have an arrest and conviction on their record. It's just a given. It's just a given. And how many recruiters and employers are asking the applicant to explain the arrest or conviction? A slim percentage. There's a slim percentage. It is refreshing when I see companies that have those opportunities, but the vast majority of companies don't. Honestly, it's like you want people to disclose it up front so you can eliminate them from the process, where technically if you're doing background checks on everyone, if you really are, but you're not. Because how many people slide through the cracks because they checked no in the box? It's really disturbing. So usually your application is flagged. You never even get past the initial step. So it's a rejection. And sometimes they tell you that you've been rejected. Other times you just don't ever get a call. You never get a follow-up. So, what's some of the excuses for not wanting to recruit and hire the houseless, the homeless? Here's some of the things I've heard. Well, what if they can't get to work on time because of lack of transportation? Or what if they don't have dependable cellular and internet connectivity to work off-site or after hours? Or, well, what if their things get stolen at the shelter or wherever they're staying? And my counter statements are, well, with all of those issues, and that could happen to any employee, whether they have a place to stay or not, their own home or not. My car could get broken into while I go inside the grocery store where my laptop is in my work bag in the back, and boom, there goes my work laptop. I could have a rough month and not have internet connection, so I may have to go to, IHOP or Starbucks or whatever. My car could break down and I don't have the money to repair it. That can happen. Whether I have a roof over my head or I don't. and here's the thing. With all these little arguments that people have, these excuses to try to rationalize their bias and their discriminatory practices and their foolishness, the vast majority of employers are clueless as to their employees' economic situation, home life, transportation arrangements, etc. Most of you don't know jack or jill about your employees other than when they clock in, clock out, the quality and quantity of work they do, and some of y'all don't even really know that. And maybe, just maybe you know that they have a habit of rewarming certain foods in the microwave in the employee kitchen that have no business being warmed up in the workplace. Maybe you know that. Maybe you know this that Susan keeps warming up that stinky fish every Friday. Maybe you know that. But you don't know about Susan's home life. Managers would be shocked to know how many of their workers are couch surfing, living in their cars, in a shelter, or staying in an efficiency or a motel. You don't know who's using their local fitness center to shower and shave and then popping over to the laundromat to wash clothes or to dry the clothes that they hand wash while taking a shower at the fitness center. Yep, you don't know that. You haven't a clue how many employees receive some type of state assistance like food or healthcare benefits. All you know is that they gave you an address and a cell number. And since most of us no longer have landlines in our residences, we no longer have residential landlines, right? You don't know. You don't know me. You don't know their stories because you don't care to. And don't say you care, because if you did, then you would know their story. So what are the excuses for not recruiting and hiring veterans? All right, so we're gonna segue. Okay, let's segue to veterans, because I've heard some interesting feedback. How can their skills apply to this job, this work environment, this role? I've heard that. Basically, when I hear those responses, I know the person doesn't know how to see the crossover applicability. And better yet, they don't ask, they haven't asked, they didn't ask the applicant why they think they would be a good fit. Because if you don't know, maybe that person can help enlighten you. Why did they apply? Ask that. Why did they apply? I mean, because why waste your time applying for something that they're not even 25% qualified for? That's not even the mindset of the professionals in our U.S. Armed Forces. They take so much pride in their work and contributions. Do you think they would casually and haphazardly just sign up for something that would embarrass them and the branch they served under? So they're going to turn around and apply to be a mechanical engineer, and all they were was a cook in the military, and that's their background, is cooking. They wouldn't waste your time. Does that make sense? It doesn't make so there's a reason why that candidate applied for that position. Now, just because you may not understand the equivalent of a different code or job title, ask or Google it. And if you can't find it on the internet, ask. It really comes down to a few things. One, it comes down to lazy recruitment tactics. That's one reason for not recruiting a diverse workforce. But the biggest reason is bias. And I'll just keep saying it. And what is unfamiliar, uncontrollable, we can't put our finger on. We can't put in a box that we deem acceptable, so we immediately reject. We reject. Even if we take the slow route to tell you were rejected. We see it in up front, we reject it. And then we're like, oh, I don't want to be seen as being a racist or a sexist or being biased or discriminatory. So we'll slow roll reject them. We'll reject them in the third round. Even though from jump I already was rejecting you. I already said no. It's cowardice and the toxic ingredient that leads to the ultimate demise of the organization. Not wanting to make your place of employment ADA compliant, for instance, at the bare minimum, means not only are you rejecting potential team members, it means you're also rejecting potential partners, investors, sponsors, clients, customers, etc. Oh my goodness. Years ago, I remember someone saying it's too much money to invest in wheelchair ramps and specialized training and modifying tasks and roles to accommodate people with special needs. And I replied on the swiftness, well, if something happened to you physically or mentally or verbally, whatever, are you ready to be released from your role in the company and be replaced by a so-called able-bodied person? And what was hilarious was the look on that person's face. They looked as though he looked like I spit in his mouth. And then I said, if one or more of your executives had restrictive duties ordered by a doctor and it's long-term or it's permanent, would you accommodate them or terminate them? Oh, and one last thing, if a client wanted to meet you at your site, would you say no because you don't have proper wheelchair access? And then admit to the client that the reason you don't is because it costs too much. Yeah. So that person went from looking like I spit in his mouth to looking like yeah. So when applied from those perspectives, it took on a whole different context, meaning, level of importance. But here's the thing, it shouldn't have to hit close to home for you to get why it's important to do it, to have it, to expect it, to plan for it. What's the worst case scenario if you hire a person with a prior conviction or arrest? They steal from the company. They get in a physical altercation with a team member or customer or vendor. So how is that any different than any of your other employees? How is it? It's not. I worked over 14 years, 15, 16, whatever, definitely over 14 years in the music industry. And let me say that if women and men ever start calling out names with hashtag #MeToo on social media, we will barely have anyone left in the industry to run it and to entertain you, because from executives to creatives to the leeching friends of the creatives, a whole lot of them would be mugshot, handcuffed, and the whole nine. But nobody's saying anything. It's still status quo up in the music industry. TV and film, those names are being dropped. Yeah. So if folks are still receiving fat salaries and bonuses and more, and many of them don't have prior arrest and conviction records, and they're executives. Predators don't walk around with a QR code stamped on them. Neither do thieves and con artists. I'm just going to make that point. You're not giving people a chance. And then you're not giving people a second chance. But you'll turn around and give a desired group of people, a desired individual, endless chances. And they've shown you their character repeatedly. And the crazy thing is this, the executive who stole millions, their motivation was just plain greed. But you don't know the motivation for this other person who has this record. You don't even know why they have the record. And like I said, they could have stole a pack of ground beef from the store to feed their family. But you'll never know, they'll never have an opportunity to allow their gifts and talents to unfold and to be a contribution to your team, because you have already blotted them out before they had a chance. So I don't know. Maybe by now of hearing me talk, and I'm not trying to guilt trip, I'm just speaking truth. Maybe you're considering how illogical your logic is, and you want to engage with, candidates from underrepresented groups. And you want to do it because You want what's best for your company and your customers, and you know that just eating lettuce never, ever, ever, ever makes it a salad. If you truly value diversity in all ways, not just the few census demographic check boxes, then I have some suggestions I'm going to share with you, all right? If you're really serious. And if you're not serious, don't keep listening. Or you can just wait, until I get to the part where I do business shout outs towards the end. Right? But if you're serious, number one, get professional help from a consulting firm or an agency that focuses on or specializes in, has experience with diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. If you try to do this in-house, you will butcher it because you don't know what you don't know. And you will most likely do the opposite of what my next suggestion is, which is don't make assumptions. And that's number two. Just like all women aren't the same, candidates from other underrepresented groups aren't the same. So don't add to your bias with stereotypes. Goodness, please don't. Not every Black person is the first in their family to go to college or graduate from high school, make it out of the hood, or even lived in the hood. Treat candidates and employees and customers as the unique individuals that they are. Just like me, don't assume that someone wouldn't want a position or be a good fit for a position based on your assumptions, whether gender-based, ability-based, skill-based, whatever. I've heard countless people say, well, what if the veteran or the homeless person has PTSD and they snap and they go postal? Oh, I've heard that so many times. And I repeat, you have no clue who has experienced high levels and repeated trauma within your organization. And just like you can't control variables that cause triggers, you can't control the trigger. So stop. Stop associating trauma with a role or function in society or circumstance in society. Trauma is trauma. Repeat trauma is trauma. It happens to stay-at-home parents. It happens to grandparents and aunts and uncles. It has nothing to do with race or gender. It has nothing to do with your social economic status. It doesn't matter how many dollars you got in the bank. Stop. So my third suggestion, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't met a person yet from an underrepresented group who prefers to be hired because of their ethnic, racial, or any other status. Recruit and hire for their skills, experience, and what you hope they can and will contribute to your team. You can cast a net in all of the areas. You can put your job postings on all the sites for veterans and all the sites for this place and that place and these group of people, whatever. But don't make it seem like, hey, come here, homeless person. We want to give you a job because we're here to be your savior. Like, no, don't do foolishness like that, right? Your recruitment messages and your interview questions need to reflect the relationship you want to have. Right? It should never at all imply or state we're interested in you because you're a minority. We're interested in you because, you're no. You've reduced them. You've put them in a box. All of their story, their gifts, their talents, their skills, you've minimized and put to the side, and you have said that the most important thing, the thing that matters most to them is this demographic, this checkbox. Really? Don't do that. That means avoid job and internship postings that say, looking for Black women for our blank position. Or homeless people are invited to apply. Or, Latinx women are invited to apply. When you hear me say it, does it make you cringe? Exactly. It sounds like boxes being checked. But it also sounds like a setup for someone to be a lab experiment. I'm sorry. If I see something and it kind of starts making you think like, uh-oh, am I going to show up to this job and all of a sudden someone's going to, bound and gag me and I'm going to be, poked and prodded with some stuff. Don't sound like a creeper. Like, you kind of sound a little predatory. What kind of relationship are you trying to have? That's what needs to be conveyed. Tip 4. I need you guys to get over this GPA nonsense and this credit score nonsense and this credit check nonsense. You automatically slam dunk a huge percentage of candidates. You don't know people's story. You don't know who was working multiple jobs while in school, had to take out credit cards to pay to live, and they got below a 3.5 GPA and they got below a 600 credit score. Just because Jim had a 700 credit score 5 years ago when you hired him, how do you know he's not in the low 500s now because life clobbered him? And this job is the only thing keeping his head above water. Credit worthiness is cryptic mumbo jumbo for another way to discriminate while pretending you're not discriminating and knowing that many individuals from underrepresented groups will be in the barrel of discriminated candidates. And another thing, that 3.75 GPA, that student could have clearly cheated and and paid their way to that GPA. You wouldn't know. How would you know? You wouldn't know. You don't know. So let's stop playing games. Drop the GPA, drop the credit check nonsense, drop the credit score nonsense, just drop it. Drop it and watch what evolves. Watch the amazing job candidates that you will have because you're not concerned about that foolishness. So that leads me to tip number 5. Be authentic, transparent, and honest, just like you want candidates to be with you. Believe it or not, people can smell bull, whether you're wearing Ivy League prep socks under your pants legs or some raggedy flip-flops. Don't lie about your diversity goals, your outlook, your vision, whatever. Be honest about why you and your company are just now making an effort to expand your team to include more voices and perspectives beyond lettuce and maybe some carrots and a few cucumber slices. And for some companies, that's a big maybe. Some of y'all are just lettuce. We look and all we see is lettuce. So that leads to the next big tip, which makes, all of these other ones possible. You have to discover your why. And I'm not talking about the overarching mission why that Foreman and Associates is so focused on helping you find and achieve. I'm talking about why do you really want to see members of your team from different regions of the country, the world, with a variety of educational, life, and career backgrounds? Why? Why does this matter to you? And why does this matter to you now? If you've been a lettuce company for 20 plus years, why do you want to now see bell peppers and onions and sunflower seeds and raisins and all these other things and all over your salad now? Why? Why? Be honest. Why? Do you even know? If it's transactional, if it's for PR, get ready to blow up, but in all the most painful of ways. At that point, just stay lettuce. Maybe you can sprinkle a couple of carrot sticks and then you have that one cherry tomato on the side, maybe. Or maybe you just stay as lettuce. It's better you do nothing and stay as you are, unchanged, than do something because you feel forced, and then that resentment bleeds into your workforce, creating an even more toxic work environment. Because that's what we see time and time again when a person from an underrepresented group gets a position in a department, a division, a company where there's few to no other people like them in the company. They come in and here they are, they're standing out as this only cherry tomato surrounded by nothing but lettuce. But the culture that permeates says, hate the cherry tomato. The cherry tomato is going to bring us down. It's going to slow us down. It's going to cost us money. Keep an eye on the cherry tomato. I heard their kind steals. They're lazy. They don't pull their fair share of the weight. It's the same old, just swap out the characters. And it's basically the same script. The cherry tomato could be women. Cherry tomato could be someone that's transgender. The cherry tomato could be a veteran. The cherry tomato can be a homeless person. The cherry tomato could be a person who's previously incarcerated. Whatever. Just swap them out. Swap the characters. Basically, it's the same script. So I will share this. There's a quote from Mahatma Gandhi that says, "No culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive." Folks, we have to be inclusive. Now, if your company's already jumped into the pool, I will say this. I'm not going to tell you to pump the brakes. I'm going to say, please give applicants a real chance to prove to you that they are the right person for the job. So I need you guys to adjust those algorithms that your handy software uses to screen resumes and applications, because you've literally used tech to factor in your bias. If you have not acknowledged it, maybe you'll acknowledge it today. And give new hires real opportunities to thrive in your organization, and allow them to show off their skills, to contribute, and have a seat and voice at the big table, where their voice is relevant. I recommend having a diverse interview panel to help you screen bias and problematic attitudes, not only in candidates, but in your own interviewers. So this gives you greater insights from more than one perspective. And I'm going to say this again. Immediately consult with a DEI advocacy group, a consulting firm, or specialist, and have them audit you, your leadership team, your organization. You have to really, really, really embrace the understanding and the truth and the fact that you shape the culture of your company, especially if you are the founder, the CEO, the president, right? If you're at the tippity top, you do. So you got to audit for your biases, and never, ever, ever stop seeking and gaining help in this area. Diversity, equity, inclusion are not the finish line, right? You can't, you get your director and you put together these ERGs and you do all this other stuff and you're like, oh, we're done, we're good, we can check that box. No, it's not the finish line. They're simply become the is of your company, right? That helps you to achieve your why, your mission, your purpose. So I mentioned earlier about, you can, cast your net into, a wider ocean, but reach out to recruitment centers and job boards, and seek to establish and nurture relationships with job seekers from diverse backgrounds. We'll unpack more in future episodes. Hopefully what was shared today has been helpful for someone listening. Hopefully I didn't tick off too many people, but I have a quote that first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share some business shout outs. So I want to share Matthews and Company, Matthews, MATHEWS and Co. They are a printing and embroidery company in Houston, Texas. They ship worldwide. So I'll make sure that their information is in the description of our podcast, as well as on our blog and social media. You can find them on Instagram at MATHEWSNCO, so Matthews and Co. And then the second business is a little something sweet. So this business is started and is operated by a teenager. They are cottage food licensed. They're in San Diego. A little something sweet. She's booked through March, so you're gonna have to email. You already have to email to place orders, but just understand, any orders that you're placing, you're not getting any time in March. So that is such a great position to be in. So from what I've found, she's still working on developing a website, so she doesn't have a website yet. But I did find some prices. So all of her sets start at $50 a dozen. Amazing work. She does great quality work, cookies, and yes, splendid. So I will provide her information. She's on Instagram at ALILSMTH sweet, a little something sweet. And I'll provide that plus the email address on our podcast description. and the blog. So we've got these great companies doing these great things and standing out in ways that people would normally say, oh, well, like, what if her friends and family had said to her, oh, that's really something that you should wait to do, when you're an adult. No, here she is. She's a teenager. She's doing her thing, and I am proud of her. So I have a lot to reflect on, but I definitely will say that we're going to definitely touch on this topic in greater detail. We're going to break it down in some smaller chunks to make it more palatable and easier for people to implement some of the techniques and the strategies that we're talking about when we're looking at recruiting and how we recruit and how we form these relationships. So with that, it's actually that time. And I want to go ahead and share this quote with you guys. It's from Laura Miller, and she is quoted as saying, diversity is about creating an environment where a person can bring their whole self to work. Yeah, that means no code switching and wearing masks and filtering and rationing. Okay. I'll save that for another episode. But I just want to say I truly value and appreciate all of you and your feedback that you guys give us. Thank you for requesting certain topics to be covered. It's time to wrap up and go our separate ways until next week. If you guys have any questions or suggestions about this show, feel free to email them to us at don'tcallitsmallbiz@gmail.com. Of course, you can also comment and share anything with us on Facebook at Foreman and Associates, on Instagram and Twitter at Foreman LLC. Of course, this podcast Instagram is Don't Call It Small, and our podcast Twitter handle is It Ain't Small. And make sure that you guys are sharing us with your friends and family and your colleagues. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Natasha L. Foreman. Reach out to me, you guys. I love when you guys are reaching out to me. Say hello, share your story. I look forward to meeting you. I want to make sure I give proper credit for this theme song. I love this theme song. It's by Shane Ivers. It's called Higher Up. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into the Don't Call It Small Business podcast, for sharing these episodes with others, and for your continued support. And don't forget what I tell you on each and every episode. Don't call what you're planning, thinking, dreaming, or doing, little or small. Go big, go bold, or go nowhere. I'll see you guys here next week. Thank you. I love you all. Take care.